Okay, I'm going to go over a little bit of the laser engraving setup. So what you see here is my laser engraver, which is actually a 3D printer that's been converted to a laser engraver by replacing the print head with this laser. It's now being controlled with the fan input control, where you would normally be cooling your heating element to varying degrees depending on the material and the settings. And so what I'm doing with this now is where that fan used to go higher and lower control, it's using a pulse width modulation to vary the power of the laser on and off as it engraves. This setup is just a temporary setup for the parts that I'm going to be engraving today that get them up off of the platen so that I can set all of the different sizes at with the same fixture. So it's got a clamping mechanism here, and I've just got it hot glued to the platen, which moves back and forth. You'll notice prominently displayed is my checklist of things to keep me from forgetting to make adjustments and updates. Sometimes when you get into a routine, when there's multiple steps, it's very easy to miss a step and create something that you wish you hadn't done. Now the nice thing is, the way this laser engraving works is I'm actually creating a mask that I'll paint later, so I can actually redo it as it turns out. I actually had to do that once because before I prominently displayed my checklist, I made a couple of mistakes in the process. And so I would just tear the tape back off and redo it. So I'll show you, this is the computer software. It's actually Lightburn that controls the laser. It's specifically tailored to control lasers. So it's kind of got the minimum features that you need for just that, as opposed to some of the other, like it's not a 3D printer program that I'm running anymore. And that directly sends commands to the Ender 3 processor. So up here you'll see a little bit better. This is the laser itself, and this moves across the track. You'll see that moving in a bit. So what I'm actually going to do is I'll show you what we're doing today, which is this is a sub-segment of some other work I'm doing. But this is the actual laser engraving of these templates. These are radius templates. You'll see the bottom here. I've got the actual, let me see if I can zoom in a little better. You'll see the end product is this black painted marking so that I can identify which template this is. And what you'll see here is the effect of the laser engraving on the actual taped part. And so you'll see the cascading 3-inch, 2 3/4, 2 1/2, 2 1/4, 2, and we're about to do a 1 3/4 inch. So I'll start by, the first thing I do is apply the masking. And so we take some of our tape, this is just blue masking tape, and it's rather old blue masking tape, which I wish I had bought a new roll. But it seems to be working. So I just tear off a piece that's roughly large enough. And because of the way I have my setup, I'm going to apply the tape just at the edge here, only for visual, because when I go to set it up, I like to see exactly where the laser is aligning. I'm just going to get rid of some of the excess here. Make sure that it's, sorry, I'm out of screen here. Make sure that it's good and applied down. And so that's all it takes for that. I'll go ahead and zoom back out to the general setup. Now the way I have this set up is I visually align it so that I put the edge of the tape roughly where the left top edge would be on this part. And hopefully I'm not blocking everything there. And this is just a light clamp. It doesn't take much. I've got the speed on the laser turned way down so that the mass of all of that doesn't make me lose steps or cause a lot of movement. The majority of the movement is left to right, and that's a very light print head, so it could move much, much faster than I'm doing, but I really want to burn it good and proper in there and get a nice groove in there for the paint to stick. So in my program now, I'll show you just for a second. This is the overall platen as the program sees it. And so you can see I'm roughly in about the middle of the platen, maybe a little to the left and forward. But I set all of that up. I drew myself a little box for reference in where the text is going to go. And then I drew the text in, and that text is what it knows to actually burn away, the black. So that's the way I have that set up. So let's go back to the overall view. So again, you know, I've got the exhaust is actually drawing fumes out the right-hand side there. Normally I would put this enclosure down, and I'll show you what that looks like. But for the sake of seeing what's going on, I'm going to leave it up for this, and I'm just going to wear my safety glasses. And I say safety glasses, laser safety glasses. And so whenever I'm operating the laser, I will put these on. Normally when I'm doing a setup, I would put these on. And when I'm actually doing the burn, then I would put this down, which has the laser safety glass in above it. And that would keep any of the harmful rays from coming out. So the first thing I generally will do when I'm setting something up is I'll turn on the laser at a very low level. And once I do that, you can see the laser, maybe difficult to see in this, at this zoom. Let me get zoomed in here a little better. And I'll bring the laser, actually before I do that, I'm going to go back out and I'm going to show you what I will generally do is bring the laser first in at the edge. And so I'm going to tell it to go at the edge of this box up here. And that will bring the laser up to where I can see it on the edge of this. And what I wanted to show you there was, you know, once it's in that zone, I can see the dot in a very low power. It can't cut anything at this power. But I'm looking for it to be in that upper left-hand corner to make sure I didn't move anything when I was setting it up. And I'll also check the Z. And so I should be able to slide this comfortably in there. This is my calibrated focal length that I know it's at its optimal focal length for the laser power and to be as crisp as the laser can make it. So I've got that set up now. And the next thing I'll do is check the text. So the last thing I cut was 2-inch. So I'm going to change that to, now I'm going to be cutting the 1 3/4. And so I have it set so it's left justified. And it should start roughly in the same left-hand location with respect to this edge. That was the way I wanted it to lay out. And I'm going to go ahead and do a test run at a low power where it's not cutting, just so I can see where it's actually going to traverse. And so I'm going to do a test run here, and I've gone through my checklist here, and I'll go through that again after this is done, so you see what I've done there, but I'll give you an idea of what it does. This will take, this is a longer one because it has the fraction, as opposed to just the 2, for example, only takes about 30 seconds. This will take about 45 because it's got about twice the amount of text it's got to create. And so it's traversing back and forth, and it will actually pulse wherever it thinks it needs to erode something. You'll see that in a little bit. So right now it's not pulsing, so to speak, because I've got it in manual override. Manual override is done with my my external setup. But once this finishes, I'm about 70% done already. I'll go ahead and turn the laser up. let me talk about the checklist for a second. So I make sure, the first thing I do is make sure the part is secure, because it's very easy to throw a part up there and forget to tape it down or clamp it down so that it doesn't move when the table starts to move, doesn't shake loose. I'll double check my XY position. Did I move the part in any way? I'll double check the height, that I didn't. This is a pretty stable height setup, but sometimes I need to double check that the height hasn't changed from part to part. Is the text correct? So more than once I've forgotten to change the text before I put up the checklist. Check the power settings. So a lot of times I'll forget to switch between the manual override, the low power, and the full power. Obviously the full power is a more hazardous mistake to make, because you need to make sure you've got your glasses and or enclosure is closed up. Most systems, when you have multiple operators particularly, you'll put an interlock on it so that somebody can't make that mistake. It won't fire. I have not installed that, so I have to be extra vigilant. So along with the power settings, do I have glasses ready? And that's a reminder that I may not have, if I ever make a mistake, I want to be on the cautious side. Or I would lower the enclosure before I energize it. And then range of motion is something that, like this fixture, if I don't have it set up properly, when it actually goes to do its thing, sometimes it will poke outside of the envelope that the enclosure has. So I have to remember to check that and make sure that I haven't done something that would, as it's cutting, wouldn't go outside that range. All right, so we're ready to start cutting now. I'm going to go ahead and take it off of manual and put it onto in a mode that is controlled by the computer. Now again, normally at this time I would lower and we would have it in that state. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the start button. It's moving it over, and again, normally it would move much faster, but I've slowed it down due to the size of the fixture. You're going to start to see some smoke forming. And let me go ahead and zoom in. You'll see just a little bit of smoke forming, which is part of why I have the exhaust over to the side, so that you'll see the exhaust moving, or the smoke moving to the right. And I'll show you what it looks like normally when I have the safety glass in place. You'll see an orange tint. You don't see as much of the blue. Well, you shouldn't see much at all of the blue. That's the high intensity beam. The orange that is getting through is just sort of remnants and a small fraction of the blue, but it's primarily other wavelengths of colors that are safer at the levels that it's emitting. And it's nearly done. And once it's done, it moves off to the side where I've programmed it to stop. And that is everything there. So now, go ahead and zoom out a bit. I generally would loosen this carefully so I don't move anything. And now I've got that marking. Sorry, you don't see that. But anyways, you've got the marking. And usually what I'll do is I will actually take some air blow across it and just try to remove any of the soot or markings. And then I'll usually take a microfiber cloth and rub across it, and that'll take the last little bit of the soot that might be loose in there. But for the most part, it vaporizes it pretty well and it goes away. Sometimes if you have a real sensitive material, you actually would apply the tape even if you are just burning it. In this case, we're more etching it. And that will keep the surrounding areas from getting soot on it. So that's the extent of this. I've got a few more to do, and then I'll be on to the next phases. Oh, and then the other thing I do, by the way, is once I think I may have said this already, but I will actually paint this with an enamel. So I have some enamel paint, and I just, with a small artist paintbrush, I'll just fill all of those in. I'll let it dry for a few minutes, and then I'll peel up the tape and try and get most of it away. Then once it's fully dry, I'll remove any of like the center letters have, like the R will have you know, a center little chunk. I don't mess with that right away usually. I usually wait for it to dry and then remove all of that. It's reasonable. You can take more care with it. You could probably find better masking than just regular painter's tape, but I find it works pretty good for most things.